Welcome to another episode of the Crypto Conversion Podcast. As always, Branden, Connor, and Matt here. So, before we get started, we just want to have everybody, if you're watching this, like, comment, review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, uh, listen wherever podcasts are found, turn on that notification bell, all the things, anything you need to get caught up or get updates for new episodes. Be a great way. We love to get you involved in the audience, and we just want to keep growing our community. And please share this with any other Christians that are in Web3, because we want to bring the church into this new wacky Web3 world and ultimately just educate the church about crypto and how the values of crypto and the church align, and the ways that they're similar and the way that they're not. That's what we're here to do, just to engage that conversation.
So,
So,
so even if they're not Christians in Web3, get Christians who are interested in Web3 or crypto, or
yeah,
who are even skeptical of it and just want to hear more, opinions on it.
absolutely.
Get
And
everyone.
and even get your Web3 friends that aren't so Christian. It's a great way to evangelize them. So, yeah, just wanted to put that disclaimer out there because I feel like we'd be doing ourselves a disservice if we weren't trying to grow. Now, let's get into the news, guys. I guess let's start with the big one for Twitter there. Dogecoin once again making itself known. Matt, I think you said something earlier. I'll let you kind of kick off the conversation with the meme and Elon, or is it Doge itself that Elon is interested in?
Well, so yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, what is it? Everybody like they think it's Dogecoin, but like he's a meme guy, right? And Doge the meme is a lot older than Doge the coin, right? So I don't know. I mean, that's the question. Is it a support of Dogecoin? Is it simply a Doge meme? Because there's all the time, anytime Elon or anybody influential on Twitter says something, everyone's like, oh, he's actually supporting this project that, the one word in there, he supported it. So, anyway, so that's the question. Is it the meme or is it the coin? The best take I saw on this is somebody tweeted and said, I'd like to imagine it was an April Fool's prank and it just took a few days to deploy.
That's good. No, I mean we are talking about the guy that bought Twitter because Babylon B basically got axed from the platform. So he has a sense of humor about him if he's checking in on the Babylon B and making himself accessible to them. So at least we can appreciate that about Elon. Despite what qualms you might have about him, he he's got a sense of humor about it.
That's true. I mean, this is because he's been a big proponent of Dogecoin for a while. In fact, he said that he was going to make Dogecoin the official currency of Twitter. So, and a number of people are saying, I mean, despite how poorly I would say the tokenomics of Dogecoin itself actually work, with someone like Elon behind it and his propensity for memes, I wouldn't be surprised to see Dogecoin become a usable Twitter currency.
Well,
I,
Ben
I will,
Ben Ben DeFrancisco from Scopelift even shared a tweet from like 5 years ago where he was talking about the potential of Doge. So, I mean, if that's somebody who we respect in the space, and if he's going to go off on a whim like that and say something about it, I'm not going to take it lightly.
so Dogecoin is the first one I bought. I don't know if that's everyone's first, but I will say, we could say that tokenomics are bad. I mean, it works like Bitcoin. It's proof of work, right? So for any qualm you have with proof of stake, it's proof of work like
But it's
Bitcoin.
unlimited, isn't it?
Yes, it's not capped. Like, it's never going to reach infinity, right? It would take infinite time to reach infinity, right? And so for anybody who says, well, I want cryptocurrency, but like my one thing is that I do think the dollar should have a 2% inflation rate, like Dogecoin achieves that, right? It's not, maybe it's not 2% right now, but like it's a fixed amount. And so as time goes on, it technically keeps lowering till it's, practically 0% inflation. But I don't know. There is something to be said. I know that one of the qualms with Bitcoin, one of the ways people attack it is that they say that the security budget keeps going down every time it gets halved, and like, oh, well, in that sense, Dogecoin's security budget does not go down, right? Anyway, I don't know. I don't own any Doge. I'll throw that disclaimer out as well. But I respect it. I think it has a lot of respectable features about it. And I think, I don't know. Maybe what I'm trying to say is you can spin any tokenomics the way you want to.
What is the relationship between Doge and Litecoin? I heard that there's a relationship there between the Litecoin community and the Dogecoin community, and basically kind of like Doge is like Litecoin's community, Litecoin community's like crap coin just for fun, and it was never meant to be taken so seriously. I've always been curious because I heard there's a connection there between Litecoin and Doge.
I don't know about the connection to Litecoin, but I do know that the creator of Dogecoin himself, like people have asked him since it became more seriously spoken of, like, about kind of the protocols, smart contracts, or not smart contracts, but just how the protocol works and, different things like that. And he's like, his response has always just been like, I created this as a meme. Like I ripped off, he ripped off Litecoin's white paper. Could it be? I know he didn't spend a lot of time coding that himself. Yeah. So it's a copycat. There's really nothing special about it, but I'm not a Dogecoin hater. It's just
sure, and I'm not a Dogecoin lover either. I just, I think there's certain respectable things. I think, if you have not every crypto, but there are enough cryptos that are slightly different from each other that like, oh, if this is your complaint with this one, like, well, actually, this other one that you hate, solves that, true. Right? So.
I don't know, just based on the correlation charts between the two of them, they have a very similar movement. I'm not sure what the connection is because both of them go back, like in terms of like crypto that's been around for a while. Those two in particular, they've been around for a long time in retrospect to the space. So I don't think Dogecoin is going anywhere. Mark Cuban has even said that out of all the cryptocurrencies that people have used on the Dallas Mavericks merchandise website, Dogecoin was the leader in terms of what people used for sales when he enabled crypto. So Dogecoin, keep on doging along, I guess, because there seems to be more utility there than what a lot of projects can claim. So with that being said, respect.
I looked it up because I was curious. I saw a blurb about it, but I just wanted to be sure. So the connection Litecoin and Dogecoin, you can use, and this is interesting because this is, I've heard it thrown around as a theoretical concept, and apparently there's some applications, but if you're mining one, you can use like the same mining setup to like run the other one at the same time. So you're like solving the same algorithm, but like, you're checking your answers on both, I guess. I don't know exactly how it works, but merged mining is what they call it.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, because I knew there was something, but I wasn't sure to what extent. So, okay,
which is a cool idea, right? If you were to launch a new proof of work currency right now, it would be hard to get enough mining power behind it. Like if you can, latch onto some existing thing, that would be the way to do it. So
I would latch onto Monero.
So I've just double checked too, and it says that Marcus designed Dogecoin protocol based on existing cryptocurrencies, Lucky Coin and Litecoin. So it uses the same script technology.
And Lucky Coin doesn't exist anymore. I'm pretty sure.
If it does, it's at the bottom of the
that because you could go on some of the old cryptocurrency websites and you can see a ton of projects that are not even available for anybody to do anything with.
What makes a project like that disappear though? Everybody just stops mining it. Like if there's one miner left, like it's still running, right?
Yeah. Well, also
technically working and like, being active. I don't know. I might call it dead
Yeah.
if nobody's holding it.
If there's no
Also
exchange, you
too,
can buy
though,
it and
like
sell it from.
we have to remember that a lot of crypto is there's a level of just like marketability to a project too. Like if you don't have marketing behind it, it sometimes doesn't even go. It doesn't go anywhere. So it's just interesting.
And we've been in crypto such a short amount of time that I feel like I see enough posts from people, who've been in longer, and they say, no, look, next cycle, some of the projects this cycle won't be doing anything next cycle.
Yeah, I
They'll
mean,
die before we even get to next cycle, or they'll die with the next cycle. And so Dogecoin is impressive that it had been around for so long, and it like had its biggest run up relative to Bitcoin, in this cycle. Not that we I don't know how we're doing this. We're gonna move the topic along so we don't this whole this is not the Dogecoin episode. We'll do a separate Dogecoin episode.
yeah.
I would actually like to do a separate
Basically, what
Dogecoin
Brandon's trying to
episode.
say is he supports Dogecoin. Everybody should go out and buy it. It has his backing.
I'm not saying anybody buy Dogecoin.
That's
I lost more.
financial advice.
I lost a ton investing in Dogecoin.
Sorry,
So
man.
I'm not going to advise people to buy that project. But I will tell people to buy a Cyber Bible. So,
Let's go.
but that's because that's the word of God. So that's different.
Get your feet wet in the NFT space.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next item.
Sure. I guess something I saw that was kind of interesting with the Shanghai upgrade coming up. I'm not sure what you guys have been looking at in regards to that, but Ethereum has been moving and cruising a little bit of a bull run this week on ETH. I'm not sure why and what's stemming or what's kind of I guess causing that, but if it's anticipation of the Shanghai upgrade and all of that ETH from Lido and Rocket Pool getting getting pushed out there to the masses, I'm not sure if that's what the you get what I'm saying, like if that's what the excitement is coming out to be. I'm just curious what your guys' thoughts are, what you might know about the Shanghai upgrade. We haven't really talked about it that much on the podcast, but it's kind of the relevant discussion in the Ethereum space.
I wonder if it's just a case of the maxim, like, buy the rumor, sell the news, So like I don't know if it's, there is hype, everyone's talking about it, so I'm going to buy it. People are buying it because it's being talked about. And but yeah, I definitely wonder. I've been kind of anticipating, trying to imagine, not predict, but imagine what would happen. Once people can unstake, because people have staked they've had some of this Ethereum has been staked for years. While they've been working on the test net before it finally merged to proof of stake, people had been staking well in advance. And I think you see at different times. So Lido is a protocol that stakes, and then they issue you a token that's staked ETH, so that you can still have this fungible representation of, this transferable representation of your stake. And it is fungible as well. But there have been certain times where like people were bearish enough on staking that, this staked ETH token was trading decently below actual Ethereum prices. Theoretically they should be 1-to-1. If anything, you might imagine staked is a little higher because, there's utility to that. There's earning on that. But anyway, so I definitely thought that was interesting. That has been interesting to see. I don't know. I wonder how much of a dump we'll see people finally unstake.
Yeah, people kind of say like one thing is exciting because it's the Ethereum chain moving along. This has been scheduled. This is good news. But the other side of it is, how many of these people, once they can finally get their ETH back, are looking to dump it so they can get cash? You really don't know. But
Derivative traders are emphasizing caution, so take that with what you subscribe to from the news portion of it. So Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this particular upgrade. Lastly, let's touch on the whole Arbitrum governance, considering that our topic today is going to be DAOs and governance. That was wild. I thought ARB was going to be the drop of the year. Everybody was talking about, how great of a project Arbitrum is, how lucky we are to be living in an age where we get to witness the greatness of Arbitrum as a project. I mean, it's kind of like I just don't know if it's all. It seems like all sizzle, no steak. You guys get what I'm saying a little bit. It's like, is there really like, are they really what they say they are? And um, that's just been my question the whole time amidst this Arbitrum drop. I was excited about it initially, and I was like, I really want to invest in this a little bit. But now I'm definitely looking at it like treating it with kids gloves. And we've had this similar conversations around projects like Chainlink and these L2s that claim to be doing something that they really might not be doing actually. So I just want to hear your thoughts and just set the record straight with Arbitrum.
Could you tell me, Brandon, because you've been following it a little longer. I haven't followed Arbitrum that much. What exactly was it that excited everybody about this second layer?
So it's similar to like Optimus basically, where people were putting their ETH in
Optimus.
anticipation of the token drop. So it's kind of like all of those L2 token drops where you put a bunch of ETH in and you're gonna get something out of it. So they were trying to do something like that, and Arbitrum has apparently been working with different projects as a base layer. Like apparently they have a partnership with Reddit and other internet companies like that. I don't know what their role is, if it's advisory or if it's actually of significance, but apparently things have been being built out on Arbitrum for a while now. But this was the big thing that everybody was waiting for. Was ARB to release a token, and it just hasn't really been what they said it would be. So my question is Arbitrum as good at what they do as they say that they are? That's my question.
So yeah, I think part of the excitement around the airdrop as well. I don't follow enough L2s, which is funny because I feel like I'm always talking about L2s, but I don't follow specific ones. I just follow the theory. But the Arbitrum, I think, was like the top in at least some metrics. I don't know if it was like value locked in the layer 2 or if it was
Yeah.
transactions made or things like that. There's one or a few metrics that was higher than all the other L2s. And so there's definitely excitement around, hey, this might be the one, which is kind of funny because I think the point of L2s, of layer 2s, is that if they all relay back to the layer 1, you can have a lot of L2s. They can all kind of serve different purposes as long as they keep they're active enough and they keep sending things back to layer 1. So I think that was part of it, is wanting to own the token. This should be highly valued because it is it is one of the most active ones, or in whatever metric it was. So the debacle, what happened recently in the last week. So it airdropped, so on and so forth. I don't know. I don't follow airdrops that often. I don't know what the conditions were. If it was simply like how much you used, Arbitrum as a network, or how much you had locked there, and but the debacle, the ARB is not used for gas fees. They use Ethereum, as far as I know, for their gas fees. They use Ether. They use Ether for their gas fees. Ethereum is the chain. So the purpose of ARB was to be used as a governance token, and this is just, it's funny. And we always talk about, right, the difference between decentralization and centralization. The ARB, like if you read the documents even before they airdropped the ARB token, there were kind of these pre-allocations. I'm pretty sure all of these pre-allocations were like set in the document, and it was like, hey, this much ARB is going to airdrop, and then this much ARB is going to, the foundation, and this much, so on and so forth. And so what happened was they made the first proposal. The first Arbitrum proposal was, hey, can we send 750 million ARB to the foundation to use at their discretion, essentially, and to sum it up. And people, I think at first it was like looking like it was going to be a yes, and then people started saying no. And then at some point, someone looked at the on-chain stuff and saw that they had already moved the 750 million tokens. And this is just the worst way to handle it. It's like, why would you put something up to a vote if you didn't want it voted on, right? Like if you would have just said, hey, this is the pre-allocation, they're getting it and they're not going to vote with it, why didn't you say that in the first place? Like why did you, I don't know. It was funny. And so they like moved it to an exchange and sold a bunch because they needed to pay expenses. And, but it was against the community vote. It ended up, I think, as a no. And then and sorry, I'm rambling a lot, or I'm going off a lot here, but ranting a lot, not rambling, but that was a ramble. What made it worse is part of the justification I was seeing from people. They were like, no, this was not like the true governance vote. This was like the temperature vote. And they quoted, or they linked or screenshotted one of Arbitrum's documents. And the document said, hey, first we'll have this unofficial temperature vote, and then it will, if it passes the temperature vote, it will move forward, maybe get feedback and then move forward to that true vote, to be implemented. And so it's like, okay, so you didn't screw over people on a real vote. You screwed over people on the pre-vote to determine whether or not it becomes a real vote. They said, no, we don't even want this to be a real vote. And then you said, okay, well, I'm doing it anyway. So I just think it was handled poorly. I think it, highlights how centralized Arbitrum still is. I don't want to necessarily FUD. For all I know, Arbitrum is still, dedicated to being a good layer 2, and they want to achieve more decentralization. This could have just been the worst PR ever. Maybe they got to hire a PR guy to help them out with decisions like this. So I don't know. I'm not necessarily doubting like the future of Arbitrum as a whole, but it definitely casts a little bit of doubt on like, is the token worth anything, at least right now, while all this power is still centralized?
Yeah. So one of my favorite Twitter follows for airdrop information, Crypto Snooper. It's funny because he shared on March 5th the Discord chat of Ed Felton, one of the co-founders of Arbitrum, basically saying in their community Discord, no, we are not planning an Arbitrum token. And that was in 2020. So, and Crypto Snooper basically hinted at like Optimism, Uniswap, and many more projects said similar things. He just kind of he's big on looking for the airdrop opportunities. And so basically, if a project says never, we're never going to do it, don't take that with a grain of salt, is basically what I'm trying to say. Because if the opportunity is right, trust me, they will. It's just only a matter of time. I'm not going to say even never for us, depending on what happens at the ebbs and flows of what we end up doing with our project we have here.
We're never launching a token.
We're not going to launch a token, but
who
knows what kind of projects come our ways. And to be honest, we're gonna make mistakes. We're gonna talk about something or maybe endorse something, and we really shouldn't. And we'll do the best we can to make sure that we're giving the most honest and thorough evaluations that we can. But just note that these projects, they're not infallible. Like they're gonna screw you some one way or another, depending on how you look at it. So just do your due diligence and just take everything with a grain of salt when it comes to this space, because if there's an opportunity for a money grab, I anticipate the opportunity. They're not going to just sit on their hands. So yeah, that I guess that's kind of what can lead into our topic, essentially, with DAOs and governance in
Last
general.
news,
Yeah,
last news, just to throw in there. We'll throw a link in the description. The Catholic Crypto, who put on the Catholic Crypto Conference,
sorry about that. Yeah.
now also has a Catholic Crypto Discord that was kind of announced in the newsletter this week. And so we'll have a link to join. Just join us. We're all there right now. And then we'll have, there are other people there as well. And we'll just have a good conversation about what it means to be, connect these two ideas, Catholicism and cryptocurrency. Or if you're Connor, you can connect Christianity and cryptocurrency, be a little more general with it.
There's a lot of subcategories in there too that Matt needs help building out. So if you want to be the owner of some of those subcategories,
Yeah.
jump on it, because the opportunity is there. Be the subject matter expert, because I'm looking at it right now and there is a ton.
If you start participating now, you might get a pre-mint for the Catholic crypto token drop, right?
No, Crescente. No,
Yeah.
just kidding.
Gosh.
All right. All right, let's get into governance tokens though.
So, governance, as we kind of mentioned with the Arbitrum, wanting to be a DAO. So DAO, DAO, decentralized autonomous organization. The joke is that it's none of them, none of the three. So, we've obviously talked about decentralization before. Autonomous, it should be able to work kind of on its own. So even the way Arbitrum worked, it's not autonomous, right? Because people had to vote, and then it seemed like the foundation still had to execute whatever the result of the vote was. And an organization, they seem organized enough, maybe some are, some aren't. So anyway, so DAOs have been doing a lot. I think the first DAO, what was it, 2015 or 2016, the DAO. And there was a hack with it. Anyway, there's a DAO for everything right now. And so lots of experiment. I like looking at it in kind of an experimental lens, what are they trying to achieve? Are they able to achieve it? Can they, how decentralized can they get? How autonomous can they get? How interesting can they be with the way governance works? How do they change the incentives? So, yeah, I don't know. Initial thoughts. What are your initial thoughts on DAOs? Are you in any DAOs?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I think it's kind of interesting actually in relation to what we were just talking about with Arbitrum. Like, I've seen a lot of projects that didn't necessarily need any token drops, and the way they get a token drop either to raise funds or maybe there's some other purpose behind it, but they'll launch basically a governance token and create a DAO. And I haven't just seen this with not just with Arbitrum, like you mentioned. Arbitrum mentioned that they would never come out with a governance token or have any sort of token airdrop because it's not really necessary. They don't need it for the protocol. Another one is Tornado Cash was the same way. It doesn't actually need a token to function. And so it functioned for the first couple years with no token. And then they ended up creating a DAO and then creating the Torn token as a governance token to go ahead and vote on proposals to update and to maintain the Tornado Cash protocol. And maybe that's a good thing, but it's creating token functionality, whereas something like ETH doesn't have to have any sort of like governance purpose behind it because it's necessary for the protocol, right? As a gas fee function. So I think, yeah, I just think like that's kind of a big part of what this topic is all about is like, does Web3 need decentralized governance? In what cases does it need it? And in what cases, is this maybe hurting what we're trying to do?
My thoughts with DAOs and something that people should be wary of when you are researching a DAO or trying to understand a community. I think it's important to, kind of put those what do you call it, like kind of like the BS glasses on. If it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. Like, use your better judgment. I think you can get a pretty good gut feeling, like if a DAO is just speaking in crypto platitudes, essentially. I wonder some of the projects that were such small cap, but had like such a inflated evaluation. You go on their websites, like I wonder how many of those LinkedIn accounts sometimes are actually real, or if it's just like somebody's face that they put a random name generator and then created a LinkedIn account for, just to be able to make their project look like it had real people surrounding it. So make sure you're vetting your projects well and understand the objectives of the DAO. Make sure that what they're doing is actually what they're doing, and just ultimately be a part of the conversation. Jump in a lot of DAOs, learn how you can help the DAO. See if you can maybe help them out with being like somebody who can evaluate things for them. Just become an asset to the community if you want to be a part of DAOs. This is coming from somebody who we really respect in the space and who I spoke to about how to get more involved in the space. And right now, DAOs are the way to go. You just got to find the right ones that pique your interest. And honestly, that's probably the way to go right now if you want to work in the Web3 space. Get paired up with DAOs that you align with and see if you can bring them value.
Yeah, I think like part of putting the BS glasses on though in a way is like analyzing like, okay, why DAO? You know,
Sure.
particularly in relation to like Arbitrum. Or I think actually one of the better examples is Chainlink. Like that
Hmm.
was a totally useless token. For a long time, it wasn't even a governance token. It had no utility. It was just a method for Chainlink to basically raise money for the protocol. And then they've started to, and I don't know how live this is now, but they do have an amount of governance where basically people can vote on the accuracy of information that's being put onto the Oracle. Um, so maybe that might have some sort of democratic benefit there. But for a long time, it was just a profit raising method. Um, and I think a lot of DAOs governance tokens basically are that. But a great example of why DAOs were initially conceived and the purpose behind them, I think, would probably be closer to what ENS did. And if you look into ENS, a critical function is what they call the price controller, which basically you register an ENS name, and you need to put some money up front to the protocol to buy the ENS name, and that's not so that you can line the pockets of people running ENS, because that's not really the case. For a long time, it was just going to a wallet that nobody could touch, um, because the idea is that if there was no cost to it, then people would just mint, infinite names and squat on useful names. So they wanted to prevent that. So they created this price controller contract. But the difficulty is you don't really know what's going to be the appropriate cost for something like that over time, especially as you look at inflation and you don't know, even what currency metrics things are going to be priced at, 5, 10, 30 years down the line. So that's a example of something that kind of needs to have some level of maintenance to the protocol. Um, and there's other cases like that in ENS. And for all of those reasons, complex protocols are very difficult to make fully autonomous because there's so many moving parts. So there are a lot of cases where you need somebody or some centralized entity that's making decisions on how the protocol develops and what's happening with the protocol. And in those cases, there is a good argument for why you would want a DAO, and why, in that case, the ENS DAO was a good thing. So, yeah, I think that topic of decentralized autonomous organizations really has to do with, okay, what is the DAO doing? Is it necessary? and is there some benefit, to people participating in it? In the case of Arbitrum, obviously not, because they weren't even listening to the vote. So
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And so I think there's different levels of DAOs. I know I was with you looking at some of these Tornado Cash contracts, and
Yeah.
I found it interesting that the governance contract actually held. Because you can decide, it's all smart contracts, right? If it's truly decentralized, right? If it's not like, vote on this and I'll make the change, if it's actually decentralized, you code in what governance can do. And I was looking at all of these Tornado Cash contracts. They're all proxy contracts, which means it's it's an address, but it'll point to other contracts, and you can update which contract it points to. And so the what that means is that the governance platform on Tornado Cash could essentially change any contract to anything. It wasn't, it's not like they just needed, it's not like, and I don't know what ENS looks like. I don't know what that DAO actually has control over. If it's simply a number, like that's one thing, like that's great. All you can change is that number. But if I don't know, I would worry about, and luckily Tornado Cash is something you aren't keeping funds in, right? You're just processing them through, right? But like I might worry about, if they could change a contract and add a claim function so they can claim the stuff in it. But there definitely is a case, I think, to be made for wanting to change certain things. And it doesn't have to be governance, it could be ownership, but then that's centralized. But when I first got in the space, I know that there were enough tokens, the hype of the, not hype, what's the word I want to use, like the standard of the day was to launch a token and then to like renounce ownership of it, so that like, oh look, I don't own it now, or to lock it, or to burn the liquidity tokens or things like that. And so that are like, look, my hands are free from it. And then you had certain, I know PancakeSwap did this, and I imagine like Uniswap is on V3 right now, right? So you have the decentralized exchange upgrades to a new thing, and sure, the contracts still technically work, but now like Uniswap, like the app only connects to the most recent version of liquidity pools, and so like now all of my tokens, all of my liquidity is locked in this older one, and there's nothing I can do because I renounced ownership. I can't even pull the liquidity to move it somewhere else. I don't know. Like so I'm with you. Like there definitely is rationale to have like, depending on what other conditionals exist, right? Whether it's I'm dependent on Uniswap somehow. I'm dependent on, the price of Ethereum, whatever dependencies exist, there definitely are cases to be made to, retain control over something. And then, it's great if you give that to governance, let the people control it. But,
Yeah, I get frustrated when projects lock up liquidity because and they just hold it for an unending amount of time, and then I'm in a couple of projects where it's like that, where it's like you definitely feel like you're an early seed investor and you're like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get my money back for being in some of these projects, and it's just like, is everything okay? Like, it's just like, hello, are you still there? And it's like, you see the number, but then that's kind of funny because then we talk about like money and the value of money and the number of it. And it just kind of makes you laugh because it's like, huh, what is money? Honestly, with crypto, it kind of makes it just seem like a number at the end of the day. What are some of your thoughts on some of these like peer-to-peer DAOs where they're trying to like they're trying to get the blockchain out of the picture, so essentially like taking the Bitcoin or Ethereum off the contracts, so it's not the smart contracts interacting with each other when we send ETH back and forth, but kind of more of a peer-to-peer swap. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, because I like looking at for projects and DAOs that are specializing in ways to use crypto that avoids all the other fees that come with moving Ethereum or Bitcoin around. I'm not sure what your guys' thoughts are, but it kind of takes some of that out of the equation. I just like looking at DAOs that are providing other use cases for cryptocurrencies.
I haven't heard of this, but it sounds like the DAO is acting like a side chain or a second layer
Yeah,
in a way.
Can
It's
you
like
give
a
me an
Lightning
example?
Network DAO.
I've never heard of this either.
Yeah, phone and DAO. It's kind of interesting. The whole premise of what they're trying to do is create a way to allow people to transact using Bitcoin, Ethereum, and without a lot of the gas fees or things like that. So those are just I like looking at projects that are helping to add onto the utility of crypto itself, because it is still a very inefficient way to move money sometimes when you look at the gas fees and the other fees that are associated with it from time to time. I shouldn't say from time to time, all the time, basically. So, yeah.
Just based on your description, it sounds to me like the DAO is acting like a custodian and people are exchanging notes of ETH between each other that the DAO is actually holding. Therefore, there's no gas fees until you request it from the DAO, I guess, and settle it back to the
Okay.
layer. That's my
So,
guess.
so
It's almost
essentially,
like
essentially, you
sorry, go
need to
ahead.
hope that they don't lose liquidity, though, right? Because if they start losing their liquidity, that could get pretty risky.
Yeah, it's more like you hope that you don't have another the DAO hack.
Sure, sure.
Because then everybody loses their money. It's like the central bank that holds all the gold, and then they issue fiat currency that represents the gold, and you transact with that. And then if you want the gold, you go back to the bank and you exchange your fiat note for the gold value.
I'm gonna ask that question.
This is just totally a guess, though, because I've never heard of this before.
I'm gonna ask the question.
In the
I'm in
phone
the
and DAO?
Discord. So
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna beg the question later.
Speaking of, so the DAO hack, right? There, I know was another DAO hack. Gosh, I can't think of it. Was like Bean or something, finance, and it was interesting. There was something written in the code that I could get into it if you want, but anyway, so we have DAO hacks. Not every DAO is hacked, but what are some of the downsides to a DAO? Like where do we see them failing? Arbitrum is a great one.
Where do they end?
Which failed, God, I don't want to say it failed. I'm not sure where it'll go, but the governance failed because it was centralized,
Yeah.
right? So it wasn't something
So
inherent.
sometimes with like Uniswap, even like there's certain like groups or entities or parties that own X amount of the tokens to create influence when community votes come about. And that can sometimes be an issue when the wrong group or the wrong party get a hold of so much your of your DAO token or governance token and create too heavy of an influence amidst the community. If you're trying to actually like implement some positive upgrades or changes, and you have this one group that just has compromised the project and is just kind of a stick in the mud, it's like, well, what's the point here? It's time to abandon ship and just go do something else. So that could sometimes be something to be wary of from a DAO perspective.
Sorry, what was your original question, Matt?
Just like what ways have DAOs, like
right.
Brandon said, how could you be wary of them? Like how have they
Yeah.
failed, or like what are some of the problems we're seeing, even if they haven't technically failed? So that's a good one, right? If you start to see things go the wrong way, or I feel like I've seen, just go off what Brandon said, I feel like I've seen a lot of people talk about DAOs that like not a lot of people vote because they're too small and they realize their vote doesn't make a huge difference, right? And it sounds like democracy around us as well, right? A lot of people don't vote because they feel like it won't make a difference. But anyway, so yeah, what are some of the problems we're seeing? What are some of the pitfalls?
Yeah, I think kind of to take like the opposite pitfall from what Brandon mentioned. Like, okay, you can have like one entity that's sort of hogging and preventing votes from passing or something. But the other case, and I feel like this one happens too often, is there really is no no way to prevent like collusion in democratic forms of government. Um, it was kind of interesting. This is something because Vitalik's the one who originally theorized the idea of a DAO, and I feel like it's. I'm not even gonna say I feel like it's taken a number of twists and turns from what his original conception was to what it is now. But I would say if anybody's been like theorizing and thinking about this the most, it would be Vitalik. I don't think anybody knows more than he does about DAOs and kind of the potential ways that they can work out. And this was his comment: is just that once you realize this, that there's nothing that can like prevent collusive forces and just basically that kind of problem, buying votes, bribing, all those sorts of things. Like you realize there really is no system that's perfectly robust against attacks. And so that's my qualm with DAOs in general. Is just we're speaking about Web3. We're talking about it's uncensorable, it's immutable. It totally once something happens, there's no retconning. It can't be changed, it can't be modified. And with DAOs, that's not really the case because as long as somebody can raise enough voting power, then they can change whatever the DAO has the ability to change. So democratic governance is not new. Like it's the same thing we've been doing for the last 300 years plus, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's really not a whole lot of new innovation there, even in Web3. It's the same problems. So the question is not like, what's the, I don't know. The question is not what's the problem with DAOs. The question is like, how can we not use DAOs? I feel like would be what Web3 people should be asking if they want to try to achieve the true Web3 vision. Like, how can we automate everything? And then we just have to realize that there's problems with DAOs and we're going to have to deal with them.
I do to flip that question more optimistically. I think there might be a question like, can DAOs fix the problems we see in traditional democracy? Right? Are there things we could do, and hard code them in such that it would fix some of these problems? I don't know. Maybe it adds a layer of transparency, but even then, it not everything can be transparent. You're right. I mean, like if I was in a DAO and somebody walked to my house and put a gun against my head and made me sign, yes on the vote, like that's not represented on chain. All you saw was I voted yes, right? Like you can't see like anything that happens off chain. So as an extreme example, right? That's never happened to me, but so I do think so it is interesting to say that none of it can. I know Vitalik at one point had said he was against transferable governance tokens, because that essentially means that someone who's rich can buy all the voting power, right? But then you're right, he has since then, I think, said you're always going to run into an issue where you could bribe people if you somehow guaranteed one person per vote. Like you could pay people to vote, right? You could I don't know, it's hard.
Well, no, I want you to talk more about this actually, because I think that's kind of a good question. I think there is something that could be done to solve that problem. If we can move away from something that's based on like market forces, I think we could solve a lot of DAO problems. Like if you could remove the idea of participating in a DAO from like, trying to pump somebody's bags, you wouldn't have a lot of DAOs that are basically created now just to try to raise funds. One, and two, you won't have a lot of the games that are played within DAOs to pump the individual holders' bags either. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that would solve a lot of problems. What Vitalik was just saying is that, you do have to realize that on some level, like democratic governance is never going to solve, the problem of decentralization. and I do just want to quote him right because it was such a good quote, but I wrote it down here. He said, once you drop the assumption that every single participant is making decisions independently, and once you realize that in any kind of system, people are going to form subgroups, people are going to talk to each other, people are going to collude with each other, there is no governance system that is completely robust against attacks. That being said, that's a totally different thing from like market forces and like those types of decentralized governance tokens. So yeah, is there a way we can make DAOs that aren't based on buying governance tokens?
Yeah, so I do want to mention, gosh, I feel like I really want to throw this one example as a bad example first, and then I want to mention a good example. But there is a DeSci project, so decentralized science project called the Vita DAO, and they are, the DAO is centered around making pharmaceutical things and creating like intellectual property NFTs, and they in a more extreme way, it wasn't just that like, oh, the rich people bought enough governance, but it was just kind of funny to see. And so I kind of want to call them out because it is very interesting and kind of against Web3 principles. They opened a round for funding and they allowed people to be, I forgot what term they used, but they were like, special contributors, if they participate in this funding round. And you had Pfizer participate in this funding round. And it's like, ooh, is Pfizer interested in Web3? But part of the part of being a special contributor meant that they could be like first in line to purchase any, intellectual property that's produced by the DAO. And so like that's one way that the DAO would raise money, right? Is they generate intellectual property, then they sell
What a
it
crock.
other people. But yeah, so it's like Pfizer essentially like by investing $500,000, like they outsource their R&D, right? They whatever the DAO creates, they're like, all right, yep, we're first in line to buy it. Anyway, it cracked me up. We lost Branden over that. It was too much for him. He's back. No, I thought that was just funny as a bad example of DAOs. As a good example of DAOs, and this is interesting. I've seen Gitcoin. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Gitcoin, but they have this grant program, and the way it works is there's a certain amount of like governance or voting power, but it is it's about how much money you donate. And so it's not like I'm going to get richer from this. It's like if I, want, I'm going to support a cause by donating, right? So it's not like I'm buying governance tokens to get richer. And the way the governance works, it's kind of hard to explain. They essentially like if a project gets like $100 donated by one person, it gets matched a certain amount. If you had, instead of like 100 by one person, you had like $10 by 10 people, 10 people each gave $10, it's matched even more. They use some form of quadratic voting, which is to say that, we're going to scale not linearly, by a certain metric, but we're going to kind of combine different metrics together. And so they, which is, sorry to go on a side tangent here, but I do think DAOs are interesting. I don't know if they're the first ones to use quadratic voting, but like they definitely can experiment with different voting styles, right? Like in the system, so like I said at the beginning of the episode, I like DAOs from like an experimental perspective. Like, what can we do? Can we push the bounds of governance? So anyway, so I think Gitcoin is interesting because it's market because it's still money, but it's like, it's not a get rich because it's not like I'm buying this and I hope they'll go up in value. It's like I'm donating this to whatever cause, whatever project. So anyway, I don't know if that kind of gets away from the market forces or not.
Kind of hits like, I don't know, a little bit like what Balaji talks about in the network state a little bit in terms of like DAOs and having like, it's not like, the beauty of DAOs is that it doesn't confine you to your like local region. Now, like obviously, like you guys were sharing stuff like Wyoming DAO, Utah DAO, essentially. Like obviously, we get what those probably mean, but like shoot, even certain exchanges were offering like like New York coin or like stuff like that. And so there's definitely a push for some of that DAO-ish governance on the blockchain from a local standpoint or from like a city or a state standpoint. But I think that biology in the network state hits the DAO thing on the head, where it's like the beauty of it is we can align with a lot of people who have the same values as we do, but we don't have to be in the same location. Now, obviously, it definitely goes into some of that technological utopianism that we need to have an episode dispelling. But a lot of those guys kind of like that. The Kevin Roses, Tim Ferriss's, Balaji's. They like to talk about that, and it's not necessarily what we believe as Christians, because we know we're not made for this world. But I do agree with Balaji to a point in the network state where it's like this is a really great opportunity to have that parallel polis that Michael Matheson Miller talks about in regards to just being able to have nice things with people that align with us from a value standpoint, belief system, all things considered. So I guess as we're closing out here, just kind of talking about how can we build DAOs that can potentially lead us in those directions where we're using them as means of unifying each other and building communion with one another. And I think that that's a very great way that a DAO can be utilized, especially in the church today. Like, shoot, I'd love a Catholic DAO if it made sense and it was sound. It was about the sound concepts that I firmly believe the church to be based upon, or at least what it should be. And are those principles being utilized to the fullest? So, yeah, that's just kind of what I just wanted to throw out there as we have our closing thoughts here.
Not to be, I'll let Matt have the last word on that, because I don't want to be like the what do you call it? The stick in the mud, the never-ending negative person. But like I'm not bullish on DAOs because I don't really think that there's anything particularly special about that idea that we can, communicate across borders. And it's just like, okay, but like we've been able to do that for forever. Like we have Discord
Sure.
servers, we have, and it's it's DAOs, at least DAOs as we define them today, or at least as we see them in practice today. It's an old idea. It's democratic governance. And in many cases, it's probably necessary because we haven't figured out how to automate everything. But I think the true vision of Web3 is to have a fully automated protocol that it has no centralized entity, whether it be a DAO or a single individual or a government, that can take away somebody's right to use that protocol and to access the functions that protocol enables. So what we need to think of DAOs as basically a necessary evil in the space at the moment. And the ideal for any protocol should be to become fully immutable, locked, deployed to the blockchain, and no backdoors to edit it. That should be the ideal. And so we should limit every case of using a DAO that we can. And I mean, people communicating cross borders, people organizing, like these are beautiful things, and these are things we need to continue to do. I don't like that that's being attached to Web3 in such a way that people think that like Web3 is bringing this, and therefore like this is something that we need to continue to promote and see more of in Web3. I think that it's really opposed to the idea of what Web3 is. But that's just the way I see it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always take a little more optimistic approach. Oh, before I final thoughts, just Brandon, you mentioned the Utah and Wyoming stuff. I shared that it is interesting, so I'd encourage anyone to look it up. It's not a Utah DAO or a Wyoming DAO, but those states and a few other states have written laws and regulations for DAOs, and some of them recognize them as legal entities. So you can create a DAO in one of these states, and it might be treated like an LLC, that doesn't have a single head, but it's kind of run by this governance. So definitely interesting in terms of adoption, some of the stuff going on there. But yeah, no, to be optimistic, again, I don't know whether quadratic voting, like who came up with the idea first, but I've seen it done in DAOs and in governance, and I've heard of examples of it being used in real world cases, and so I think it's a good experimental ground, and I think whatever work people are doing now will lay the groundwork for governance things that we have right now outside of off chain. You have corporations that have shareholders who vote. In a Web3 world, they become shares become tokens, and they can vote through a contract, right? I'd love to see a more verifiable something on chain. If we had elections on chain, that'd be great, and we could verify without seeing someone's identity, but we can verify how many people voted, and votes one way or another. I think that would be incredible for transparency. So anyway, I'm always excited about the future, excited to see what people are doing. And I view DAOs as, you're right, maybe DAOs as DAOs might not live for too long, but I think a lot of the stuff they're doing will be useful, valuable in one way or another. Branden, close us out.
So ultimately, DAOs are, well, not necessarily neutral, but not necessarily bad, but maybe not necessarily good. All depends on who's behind the Wizard of Oz curtain, basically, projecting the illustrations. So take our advice, take this episode with a grain of salt. We'd really appreciate just some feedback on your opinions on DAOs in the comment section, just to help further the conversation, and maybe persuade us, maybe dissuade us, depending on how we're feeling that day when we get them. But yeah, ultimately tell us about some DAOs that you all are privy to that we might not know about, that might be worth at least giving a look. I mean, even though Connor's thoughts and sentiments are similar to mine in certain regards, even though I do enjoy looking at the DAO projects, and I understand that that's where people should go if they want to potentially work in Web3 right now. I do understand where Connor's coming from, so just send us some projects to look at, and just to maybe see. We enjoy the opportunity to learn more about the space as we continue growing and sharing our thoughts with all of you. Please continue to share your thoughts with us as well. And other than that, it's been a great episode. We look forward to keep dishing these episodes out. I think this episode's going to be released on Easter, so happy Easter, everybody. Look forward to seeing you all in the Easter season. As Catholics, we celebrate Easter for a long time. I don't know how long Connor celebrates Easter for, but regardless of that, we hope you all have a blessed Easter, and we hope that you all get to spend some time with your families, and we will look forward to seeing you all in the next episode. God bless.